Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's live for Awaken Your Magic. My name is Tracy Nicholas, and I help spiritually curious people develop a custom personal magic practice that they can trust. And today we're going to be talking about divination. Now, I've talked before about pendulum and oracle cards, but we're going to dive into some uh, less common divination. Now, there are thousands of different kinds of divination. There are so many ways that people have tried to figure out what the future holds or discover hidden knowledge. And so I'm not going to run down a list, but I will put a list in the show notes of all of the ones I could find. And some of them are crazy. I'm going to focus a little bit more today on divination that you could actually do or would be interested in doing. And so, although I do have one that I'm going to recommend you not do, but it was too interesting not to include. So we'll talk about that in a bit. Now, the definition, the dictionary definition of divination is, as I was saying earlier, to foresee or foretell the future or to find hidden knowledge. And it includes the interpretation of omens, or it can be by supernatural means. And omens are occurrences that are believed to portend a certain future, right? If you hear an owl, someone that you know is going to die, or maybe even you are going to die, those kinds of superstitions. Now, divination is to help you make decisions. Maybe you want to find a lost object, you want to predict the future, maybe you want to try and determine the cause of an illness. But it hasn't always been that way. In ancient Rome, they believed that divination was a way to discover the will of the gods. And so they were always trying to interpret that. Now, there's something called inductive divination, and that employs like non-human phenomenon as signs that can be read. So astrology, or reading lightning bolts, or trying to decipher what clouds, like cloud gazing, reading maybe runes, or pyromancy, which is a form of scrying by looking into the flames. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later. It can also be looking at burn marks in wood, if you put out a flame, and seeing what the patterns are that the burn marks are in. There's also geomancy. And geomancy is a really interesting one. It's taking the earth or natural features of the earth and using those for divination. Now, there is also inspirational divination. It's just sort of what I'm calling it, which is visions, dreams, and that would include like oracles and seers and prophets. And those require some form of trained skill. Some people obviously naturally have a talent, but there is some training. And there's training for things like reading runes. And we're going to talk about that in a little more detail. I don't want to get too deep into any of the detail because I want to give you an overview today. And so you can sort of see what's out there. And like I said, there are thousands and thousands of different ways to do divination. So hopefully these will give you some ideas, and you can check out the list later to see if any of the other ones sound interesting to you. Now, the first one I'm going to talk about is the one that I do not recommend, but if you're moved to this, it's fine. It's hieromancy, and that is divination using entrails. And this was utilized heavily beginning in like ancient Mesopotamia. And they would make a sacrifice, but then they would look at the entrails, right? They would look and see like a healthy liver was a very positive sign. If there were if they had a heart and there was a defect in the heart that they had cut out of an animal, then that was a really bad sign. Sometimes they would throw the intestines and interpret the shapes of where the intestines landed. Again, I'm not recommending that one. I'm just an interesting, weird one. Now, there's tyromancy, which this may be my all-time favorite form of divination. And I don't know if you don't know me, I always talk about how using my pendulum is my favorite form, but this one might top it. And this is divination using cheese.
I did not see that coming.
Now, there's a couple different ways you can do this. If you have a cheese that has holes in it, like a Swiss cheese, you can cut it open and then look at the holes and try and interpret the shapes, right? Do you see, a heart-shaped, more or less, hole? Then maybe it's, and you have a question, right? You're like, is love coming my way? You see a heart-shaped hole. That's going to be a great sign. Now, the other way that people have done it historically is they cut up different, blocks of cheese, right? And then they whisper their intention into the cheese. They whisper a name, say, if they're looking for love, and they have a couple of potential suitors, then they whisper the names, and then they put them out. And whichever one molds first is the one, that's going to be your one true love. So other forms that are not quite as amusing. There is ceromancy, which is divination using melted wax. And they, you burn a candle and you let it melt, and then you interpret again the shape of the melted wax. And there's also something called molybdenancy. And molybdenancy uses metal instead of wax. And it was historically typically lead. So that was, it's again, just letting it melt and seeing what the shapes come up with when it's cooled off. Now, another one that I like a lot is using herring fat and membranes. And this was popular in mid-19th century Belfast. And what people would do, they would cut the membrane out that was along the spine of the herring. And this one, as opposed to the moldy cheese, you actually can eat it if you like herring. But they would take the membrane and they would toss it against a wall, and it would stick to the wall. and they would, again, interpret the shapes. And sometimes they would interpret it as an initial, and that would be the man that they were to marry, or they would interpret it as either character or body type. Like if it was like bent over, then maybe not such an upright kind of guy, or maybe, is a crooked spine. I don't know. So that's how they would interpret that. Don't know how much that is used these days, but it was in, Ireland and Scotland was where that came from. So
I totally wasn't expecting this to be quite so hilarious.
Well, like I said, I had to include some that because they were just too funny not to share. So, okay, a little bit less hilarious. The I Ching, which is based on something called the Book of Changes, and it's 64 different hexagrams. And it started as an oral tradition, and it predates recorded history. At some point, they started carving yarrow sticks with these different hexagrams, sort of like runes. And they would, then toss them and interpret how they're shaped and how they work together. So that's, one. And it's really related to bone divination. And bone divination is, throwing the bones. And we see this practice all around the world in ancient times. In ancient Africa, they would use it to communicate with ancestral spirits, that so they could provide guidance on, the things that they were doing. In ancient Europe, they cast marked bones onto a sacred cloth, and then they would again interpret the patterns. And in ancient China, they would carve questions onto animal bones or turtle shells and apply heat until the bones or the shells cracked, and then they would interpret those cracks. So, and like, obviously you can throw bones if you want. I have created my own set, and I do have some bones in there, and I've got different colored string, and I've assigned meaning to these. But then I've got this adorable little acorn cap that I use, and I've got, this is a die, but it's so hard to see, get in front of me. But it's got little skulls on it, so sometimes the die gets in there. I've got, an antique button. And so when you make a set of these, what I would do is, I've got a bead. What I would do is write down the interpretations that you're coming up with, because unless you're doing this every day and you're super familiar with it, this is a buffalo tooth. But yeah, anything that you want. And most of this stuff was just like either from my jewelry box or things I found in nature. And so yeah, that's kind of, if you wanted to make your own set and throw your own bones, that's super easy to do. And it was fun because it was like a little treasure hunt in my house. And I was just walking around finding little things. And what I used for it, I've got this just plain old piece of leather that I end up putting out so they don't go rolling with the things that are around. And also, so my cat doesn't come and knock them off the table as he is wont to do all the time.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
When you throw them, does it matter which direction they're going? How would you?
I think that what's key here is you look at what pieces are touching other pieces, if you've got a directional piece, like if you've got something, like I would say that the base of this piece would be down low because there's more room up here. So I would interpret the top of this as a pointing direction. And if it was maybe pointing like away from me, it's like I would interpret it as moving forward. And let's see, what else do I have that has sides? Like this, I use this, which is just a little clay piece that I made. And if it was facing me, I would take that as, more like the tarot card of death, right? Like change is coming. There's going to be, part of like what you experience today may be going away, or part of what you are doing now, it may be time to let that go. So that's how I would interpret it. But again, you're assigning your own meanings based on your symbolism in your life. And so I think that it's like any divination, it's about your interpretation. So and that's why I suggest you write down the definitions, because that can help you remember. Like I've probably got 35 different pieces in mine. And I know a friend of mine who basically has a bunch of little charms, and he's got like 70 of them. And so he reaches in and he grabs some and he throws them. And so he interprets what comes out. And so not every piece comes out every time. And so that's why I think, remember, because I don't frankly toss my bones anywhere near the frequency that would have me remembering all of these different pieces. And I'd be like, I wonder what that one means. I have no idea.
So you reach in and grab them and then throw it? Is that the process?
I just like, move them around a little bit, and then I grab what comes up and throw it. And then
Okay, so that was the piece I was missing. I was thinking, you dump them all out, and it's like, well, they all mean all the same things.
yeah, no, you reach in, you grab some. That's why you need, more than 5 of them, because if you're, tossing 5, that you're always going to get all 5, right? So
Right,
I
and you
think
want it to be the answer you want.
yeah. If you don't like that answer, of course you just throw it again. No, no. Listen to the bones. Listen to your divination. Listen to your pendulum. Okay, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about runes. And rune stones are an ancient thing. They're Proto-Germanic tradition, and they date back possibly toward the 1st century AD. Now, there is something called the Elder Futhark and something called the Younger Futhark. And the Elder Futhark was originally 24 letters, and they had very specific assigned meanings, and they were usually made out of wood or stone. Now, they were a method of writing, of fortune telling, uh, bind runes, and sigils. And so the origin of the word rune stems from the Germanic word for mystery or secret. And they are similar to like things that we've found in Ireland, in Old English. And so a lot of places around the world create these signs and use them for like telling the future. And they, oh, and the word can also mean poem. Now, I'm going to just show you a couple of examples. This is a set that I've had for many, many years. And this is, it's like, it feels a little like stone, but it's clay. And it's just a really hard fired clay. And with this, like what I typically do, both just individually and in circle, I typically will just reach in the bag, stir it around, and then I pick it. And whatever I get is the one that I interpret. I've also got this set, which these are much smaller, and they are crystals. I have, oh, I don't have autofocus here. I keep expecting my Zoom to autofocus, but we're not in Zoom. But these are just crystals, and they are carved and then with a little gold paint in there so I can tell. And that set I got on Amazon, I want to say, for like, I don't know, $5, $6. So super cheap. Now, I am studying the runes right now. I do not have them all memorized. So I was recommended this book, Taking Up the Runes by Diana Paxson. And it's been really interesting so far. And it has the history of runes. It tells you like which runes correspond to which other runes. So if you're super interested in runes, I would get into it. You can just get charts, say, this means X, Y, and Z. Now the younger Futhark was created later, and it was just added. I don't even know how many more are added. I could look in my rune book. But they added a bunch more with new, additional interpretations, and that's kind of where uh, the two different sets come from. So the Elder Futhark is older. So what do we have? Younger. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 15. So they added 15 more runes with new interpretations. And when I'm in circle, we use both the Elder and the Younger Futhark. But like here individually, I just use the Elder. And that's typically going to be the set you see when you're going to buy a set. You can find the Younger Futhark, but you have to go looking for it. But if it's just runes, that's probably just the Elder. Okay.
And do
So,
they usually come with like interpretations?
well, This one did. And it is very interesting to me because it was like a book that this guy wrote up. But there is so much debate around this particular set and the book, and people are like, that's not it. That's not really, you can go online and find the standard in like interpretations. I have found a person, I interviewed her, but she goes by the title the Rune Queen, and she does a really interesting thing, and it comes like, I think it comes every day, or it's at least a few times a week, and she emails out this interpretation like a rune with an interpretation, and hers are really in depth and they're really interesting. And I think that it's fascinating to see a more in depth, because most of the rune interpretations are like, oh, this stands for the ox and it's, strength. And I was listening to her interpretation at one point, and she said, oh yeah, well, it represents strength and wealth, right? Because that's, if you had a lot of oxen, you were wealthy way back when. And she said, but it also represents responsibility, because you've got to take care of your cattle and you've got to feed them and make sure that, they have water and all of those things. And it was just such an interesting take on it. And I was like, of course it would mean that as well. So I say, try to find some deeper meanings. There's also a guy on Instagram that he pulls two runes every day, and it's called, I think it's called Crossroad Runes. And he sort of talks about how those two runes together, like what that interpretation means, because they came out together. Um, so anyway, so that is runes.
Jen was sharing that Laura Vesta also has a great book on runes. Have you heard of that?
I have not. But I haven't looked really hard for different books. Somebody that I trust and who knows a lot about runes recommended this one, so I just went with it. And it's really, it's cool because, where did I put it? I put it over here. It's cool because it goes into the history of how like historic interpretations were and how they're different from the way that we interpret now. And it also gives a bunch of rituals that you can do with runes, which I thought was pretty interesting. So, line two, there are so many books. It's true. And it's like all magical stuff, right? You can find a million interpretations. You can find a bunch of different ways to do things, and it's like the more you look, the more you'll find. Okay, on to scrying. And scrying, there's a couple of different ways that you can do it. You can do, as I said earlier, you can like peer into the fire. You can go cloud gazing. You can look into, most people use black mirrors. Sometimes you'll find one that is like a disc of obsidian, and people will use that. For me personally, I when I was a teenager, I had this, my mom had a big mirror in like the little entryway, and the silvering on the back of it started to go bad. And so, I was 16 or whatever. So, everything that I was like, oh, I'll spray paint that black, right? Because that was my aesthetic back then. So I spray painted the frame black, but then, the silvering, I had to figure out what to do because it was peeling off, in part of in one area. And so it looked terrible for a mirror. So that's why my mom didn't want it. But so I just, took a razor blade to it and peeled off, scraped off all the silvering, and then I spray painted that black too. And I've still got that in my bedroom today. But it's impractical. So the way that you're scrying is you're looking into something, you're relaxing your eyes, you're looking in and sort of seeing what comes up for you. And maybe you're visualizing something, maybe you're looking at the way that the flames are dancing. And so you can also, so another way to scry is to use water. And I like to use a black container just because I feel like I can gaze deeper into it. If it's clear, you sort of, like see what's beyond. And I like the black because and it's similar to, a black mirror or a black obsidian scrying stone. You can look at the shape of smoke and interpret that. Now, I think this is interesting. I think this is interesting because a lot of people use crystal balls, right? And maybe it's just because there'll be a base below it. Like I've got a tiny little base for this one. And so you don't see what is, like you don't see through it like you would just a piece of glass. But I think it's interesting that the go-to is a clear,
Crystal
dome.
ball.
Crystal ball, yeah. And you know what they say? It's terrible luck to put your crystal ball by the window. So never do that. But not because it's unlucky, because the sun might shine on it and cause a fire in your home. So
Good warning.
yeah, that's really the reason that you're not supposed to put it by the window. Now you can also do, this is just a glass globe. And so you could use that. And again, it's about seeing what comes up for you. My typical is to do, and this is pretty small. I would like to do it larger, but this is what I had. And again, use what you have. But this was the only black vessel that I had available. So that's what I've been using. And it's working just fine. Um, Now you can also, this is interesting, although I don't like doing this one because it's super unsettling, but you can gaze into someone else's eye and scry that way. And I think that that is very fascinating. So you can use water, you can use oil, lots of different ways to do your scrying. So did I show you all my toys? Yes, I think I showed you all my toys. Now the next one is palmistry. And palmistry is, of course, yeah, I know, Jen, it is very unsettling. And palmistry is obviously reading the lines on your hands. And I am not super into this. It's okay. It feels more like a little party trick for me. So anyway, I got this to help me out. Yeah, and again, this was like $7 on Amazon. It comes with, which I have now lost, of course, it came with a little pamphlet that said, here's what it means if this line is long. It went into, like, you interpret things like, is it a broken line? Is it a solid line? Is it a long line? Is it hashed? And all the different kinds of ways of looking at not only how long the line is, but what shape it is, like what the characteristics of it are. So yeah, and again, just a little Amazon purchase. So next, I want to talk about tasseography. And tasseography is, and I hesitated to include this one because I think a lot of people know, and I wanted to find things that people didn't know as much, but it is reading tea leaves or coffee grounds, or even, you can even do it, get this, with wine sediment. So yeah, if you're drinking that red wine, you can do it with that too. And basically what it is, you have loose tea and why am I so blurry? Hang on, guys. I'm going to shut this off for a moment and turn it back on. Oh, maybe I'm just blurry today. See, I move around a lot. That's why I need the autofocus and why Zoom has spoiled me. So with the tea leaves or the coffee grounds or the wine, you drink it, right? You have the coffee grounds in the water or the tea leaves in the water. The sediment is going to be there. You drink it, and then you swirl your cup around. And again, looking for the shapes and what they mean. What do you see when you look at it? I've got, this was a gift from my mother, and it is a like tea leaf reading cup. And it was really funny because the year that she gave this to me, it was a Christmas gift. And she must have gotten it at TJ Maxx because I had bought her the exact same gift. So
Cool is that?
Yeah, and it's also got all of the the signs on there, and some people do that. Like some people will take it. You can just swirl it around, but some people take it and then they flip it over and you know read it in the saucer. So that's certainly a valid way of doing it. I don't think you would be doing that with your wine, but hey, I don't know your life. Maybe you would. Okay, next one. I touched on this earlier, is geomancy, and that is earth divination. Now, you might be interpreting geographical features of, a cliff that you see in the distance. You might be looking at markings on the ground or cracks in the earth, or patterns that are formed in soil or sand or what have you. There are some traditions that will take a handful of dirt or sand and throw it in the air and interpret the patterns when it lands. And I think that that's a really interesting way. And that most of the evidence I found for that, for throwing it in the air, comes out of the African continent. So don't know why that is, but that's where I find it. Now, the next one is divination using birds, which is ornithomancy. Now, this was practiced back, from ancient Rome. And there were these public priests called augurs, and they would observe the birds. They would observe flight patterns. They would observe how many birds there were, in a flock. They would interpret the songs or the cries of the birds. And again, this was in an effort to understand the will of the gods. And so they would look at these birds. And even if, like, food fell, they would put out food for the birds, and if it fell from the beak, that would mean a certain thing, and which pile they went to. Now, as a subsection of this, there's alectryomancy, and alectryomancy is divination using chickens. And so I couldn't end with all the
Sounds like voodoo.
But this was, again, like putting a piece of grain in different places and being like, this one represents this person. This one represents whether or not, we're going to win on the battlefield. And they would look to where the chicken would go. And, what the question, whatever their question was, would, like, maybe they said, okay, we want to know from which direction will my future husband come? And so you put it in different directions, and then you see where the chicken goes first, and then you say, okay, I'm going to be looking to the south, looking for a man coming from the south, or a woman. So yeah, definitely not the entrail type of divination, although that is done as well. Now, next up, we have bibliomancy. And bibliomancy is divination using books. And we all know you pick up a book, you open it to anywhere, and you go down however many lines, and whatever you read, that's what you interpret. Now, in ancient times, they typically would use, like among Greeks and Romans, and they would use the Bible, the Book of Psalms, the Quran, and I actually have this is my book of Psalms, which I consider to be a spell book. And I got this one from it's there was a little free library in front of a church in the neighborhood I walked around in. And I just looked and they had like 12 of them. And I was like, oh, cool, little book of spells for me, given to me by the Catholic Church. It's perfect. And so
they're all about the spells.
yeah, exactly. But you can, I just random book. I was sent this book to review. And so let's see. Um, some maintain that the prevalence of these figures indicate the possibility of a widespread prehistoric matriarchal religion. So, Jill, any
all about the divination that we're talking about today?
Yeah, and it's funny because there's some clip going around that I have been seeing on Facebook lately that is talking about how for the vast majority of humankind that we were matriarchal societies. It's only like it's like 10% of the time that we've been around has it been patriarchal. And we're seeing how well that is turning out. So that's using books. And I think that it's a good one because, again, it used to be one that people would go, like they'd have to go find a Bible, right? And a lot of people owned a Bible, but not any other books because they were expensive and difficult to come by. Now I think that it's easier because most of us have bunches of books, just laying around that waiting to be used for divination. Now, another fun one is...
We used to call it Bible roulette.
Oh, I like that. So it's cladonomacy. Woo. And that is another ancient Greek practice, but super easy to do. And it's divination by words overheard. And so if you're out and about in public and you have a question, just see whoever walks by and whatever they're talking about, interpret that. And there was a statue, I can't remember the name of the statue, and this was in ancient Rome. They would go up to the statue and whisper a question into the statue's ear. And then they would cover their ears and go away and walk around. And then whatever they first heard when they uncovered their ears for whatever, amount of time felt right to them, that would be what their message from the gods was. So yeah. Now, of course, you can do any of the things I'm talking about. I've tried mostly all of them, not the entrails, not doing that, and not the herring. And I don't have any chickens handy, so I guess I'm not doing that one either. But you can do any of those, but you can also, go electronic if you want. You can get a spirit box app. If you believe in that sort of thing, which I always find a little ridiculous. But there are apps for astrology, tarot, runes, all of these different kinds of things.
Magic 8-ball.
Oh yeah. You can definitely get a magic 8-ball, and I've got a couple of different astrology apps. So easy stuff to do. Now I don't think I saw any questions. Yes, on fishing boats, Jen. But I don't think I saw any questions. So if you don't have any questions, Jill, and nobody in the comments have any questions, that's really everything I had about runes today. Now, if you want to get more involved in the conversations like these, please feel free to go to my school community, and that is called Awaken Your Magic. And in the replay, I will put a link. If you are following Jill on her school community, you can find me through hers because I'm in her community as well. Or you can just message me and I will send you a link that you can get to my community. It's free to join, and I would love to talk to everybody about more topics like this. And if you have any ideas for topics upcoming, please let me know and I will be sure to address it. So thanks for showing up, everybody. I appreciate it. Bye.